While Gerald Jones, in his argumentative essay, Violent Media is Good for Kids, would like to present the idea that violent media produces strong, courageous, and effective groups in society, he fails to give enough support to make the argument plausible even in theory. Not only that, he fails to look at all the research that proves the contrary of this. So I have to respectfully disagree with his argument, because he just fails to, even in his examples, give enough detail of why those examples are beneficial to children, especially young children. We know today, as parents and as people who work with children, that young children are very easily influenced. And whenever they watch a movie or play a game, they're often likely to play it out and try to do what they see in that game or in that movie, thinking not of the consequences of those actions, but that it's all harmless fun. Because what do we always tell them when we watch movies? Well, this is just make-believe. But we don't point out the importance of not imitating everything we see. Not only does he not give enough evidence to support his theory in his argument, I call it a theory because violence begets violence. The more violence a person is exposed to, it is proven that the more aggressive and the shorter-tempered and the more violent those individuals might be likely to become. Now, some people are more predisposed to this behavior than others, I agree. And I do blame parenting on it, because there is some irresponsible parenting going on when we allow children to view things without guidance. And what I mean by guidance is when we watch a movie with a child, or we allow them to play a game, we need to point out the lesson or moral in that story. Not only do we need to do that, but we need to explain to them how some of the behaviors that are displayed on television do not work in real life situations, and that a lot of what they're seeing is fantasy, is someone's imagination of what could be a possibility. But not only that, there's a lot of behaviors that are displayed on these programs that are supposed to be viewed by children that are dangerous for them to imitate and could take their very lives. So I cannot agree with him. The way I came to my conclusion was I read his essay several times, first of all, to try to get a feel for what he was trying to say. Because in some of the examples he gave, they were quite distracting from the overall essay itself, because they did not seem to support what his theory was, and they kind of were like a train going off the track, or someone going out in the left field. And it made absolutely no sense. With other examples, they could have been good examples had he took the time to give reasons why those particular scenes in the movie could be beneficial to the growth of character in young children. And he seemed to be more obsessed with his own feelings of inadequacy and awkwardness as a teenager and using those things to deal with it, than really proving the point of how violent media can even benefit children at all. I feel like if he had given some statistics to prove it, actually done some research that had been proven to back it up, and in his examples made it clearer how they fit into the overall scheme of things, he could have been more effective. I'm not saying violence itself is necessarily a bad thing, but we need to explain the purpose behind it, the right time for it, and how to deal with those situations in a non-violent way, if at all possible. We also need to explain what the character is trying to do or overcome, so that when children watch these things, it's not just entertainment, but it becomes a lesson of life that they can apply. And I really feel like if he had took and done a little more research and went into a little more detail, not been so vague, he could have accomplished a way to include movies that have some violence in them that can be beneficial, and took it from a different direction rather than just saying all violent media is beneficial, saying certain types of violent media can be beneficial. Because there are certain programs that have a very good moral or lesson in them, and even though they have a little bit of violence, that is not the total focus of that particular program. I do feel like as parents we need to sit down and watch programs with the kids. We need to see what they're being taught, because yes, they're being taught something from what they watch, and it may not be something that goes along with your beliefs that you're trying to raise them up with, and that you feel like are important for them to learn to be a mature adult one day. And there's a lot of bad teachings that go on even in programs we don't consider violent. So we really need to, as parents, step back, take a look, and remember that we are the adults, and a child thinks like a child. According to the Bible in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11, when I was a child, I spake as a child, understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. This is saying that there comes a time when we have to be the adult. We have to grow up. And we are responsible to train up our children in the way we expect them to go. And if we rely on entertainment to teach our kids, I'm going to tell you, they're not going to teach them what you would hope they would teach them. They're going to get a lot of bad teachings. So you need to be aware of what they're watching and listening to and playing, and make sure you explain the pros and cons of the behaviors displayed in those things and the lessons being taught in those things, and make sure that the child understands that if they react that way, that sometimes it could be harmful, and that we as parents don't just make excuses for why we don't parent, because that's what we are. We're a parent, and part of the job as a parent is not only to hug up and love on your babies, but it's to teach them what's right and wrong. And if you rely on the TV and the entertainment industry and media to do this, then they will miss out greatly on so many valuable, important things that we could have the joy and the privilege to teach them. This is Anna Saldana, and I hope that the author of this essay goes back and re-looks things over and does a rewrite on it so that he can show more effective examples and go into more detail on the examples he chose to use, and maybe make us understand who read it where he's really coming from, because right now, as it stands, it's kind of hard for him to prove his point as it is written. Now, there are some positive things in it. I do suggest you read it because it is interesting reading, and I suggest you think about it and respond to him about it and let him know, areas you think that he could either prove or that disprove his point in the essay.